Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Zena Suisa of Residence Executive and Team Coaching. Our company coaches executives, leaders, teams, and we do corporate institutional training. This is another episode of How Does This Resonate with You? So please leave some comments. We'd love to hear that from you. And I'm so delighted and thrilled, actually, to have Jennifer Britton with me today. Jennifer, and I have to read because she's got a lot of stuff here. Jennifer's an author, coach, and trainer. She's the author of 2 books, which you will see over here, Effective Group Coaching and From One to Many. She's an expert, I believe a total expert in the area of group and team coaching. She's an extremely skilled coach. She's taught, coached, and trained professionals all over the world. She's won a PRISM Award, which is a terrific award for her skills. She's worked with the UN and other international organizations as a program director and program manager. And today, we're going to cover her expertise as group and team coaching, but I believe she can do leadership and many other things. We're going to cover her book, From One to Many, and we're going to cover just a couple of components because there's so many. So starting with collaboration, which I think is an important area of groups. First of all, welcome, Jennifer.
Well, thank you, Zena. It's nice, and anyone who's met me before might wonder about my background. It is summer, so I get to work remote, which actually is another area that I write on. So today we're going to focus more on coaching, but you know, the nice thing about coaching conversations today is that it is bringing people together from across the world so that we can collaborate using the technology like we're using today. So thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so happy to have you. So starting off with collaboration, I thought I would go back into your book and find a really good definition of collaboration by Berlin, Nemero, and Berlin. Collaboration occurs when individuals work together toward a shared goal. Completing the work is independent in relationships with a purpose, and individuals working together in purposeful ways towards a shared goal are committed to each other's success. So Jennifer, what do you think employees need in order to collaborate?
Wow. Well, what a great question. I think you've really underscored a lot of the main things we see in organizations today. We need those relationships with purpose. We need alignment around our goals and where we're going. We need to even have time to have the conversations so that we can get aligned. And just like the definition that you've read out, Zena, very much we need to do this purposefully. I think in today's VUCA world, we're just running all the time. And that's part of why I think group and team coaching continues to increase in popularity and increase also in impact, because teams and groups and leaders are running so quickly today. Coaching is one of the very few places that people get to slow down, be in dialogue, focus, and look at what's working and what's not. So collaboration involves all of that, including, you know, the foundation of solid relationships. We can't collaborate if we don't know each other, if we don't know how we blend together, and what the different stakes are in our work.
So how would you coach? I know coaching is a very broad area and it's such an important area in this world. How would you coach people with regards to employees, with regards to needs? How would you help them discover their own needs? So that they'll collaborate.
Yeah. Well, I think a great starting point is really helping people understand what they're bringing to the table. What are the skills and strengths and styles they bring? And how does that interface with the people they're wanting to collaborate? There's been a lot of writing in recent years since my book From One to Many came out about, are we over collaborating? And sometimes collaboration is seen as a panacea for everything. We really do need to get specific on when is collaboration important and when is it maybe not the best way to, you know, to approach the issues. So depending on your context for employees, I think doing work around emotional intelligence, I know that's an area you focus in on, that's a great starting point to help people understand who are they and what do they bring as employees? What are those unique talents and strengths and skills that they can use, sometimes overuse, in service to the work that they do and in service to the collaborations they have.
I think you've helped my audience understand exactly what needs to be done, but we need to go do the work. That's the whole thing. So taking it from a leadership perspective, how would a leader help employees to be aware of their own strengths and skills so that they will be more collaborative?
Yeah. Well, this is the million-dollar question. And of course, every team is a little bit different. I think the key thing is, how are you creating a pause to invest in time around this? So every organization, I think today is embracing different models, whether it's emotional intelligence, whether it's strengths work, whether it's just generic team development. But we want to be really specific in how are we helping people gain that self-awareness as well as build relationships with purpose. I think many times team development gets a bit of a bad rap because it's like, oh, let's just have an offsite and all come back and be friends. Yeah. That's not what team development is in today's world. It's about team development with purpose. Why are we doing this? How will it move the needle on our business results? And, anything to do with employee development today needs to have both that self-focus, but also the results focus. How are we leaving time for people to connect the dots to understand that if I am a driver and good at getting results, how will that help us move projects forward? And also, how might that get in the way of the relationships that I have? How may I tick people off? And again, if we look out on the landscape to books like Radical Candor, I think, another key issue related to this is even if your team knows what they're bringing to the table, how effective are they in turning up the volume and turning it down in relationship with others? So that's where, again, I think the next step most teams find themselves in is how do we have the difficult conversations? How do we learn to effectively work across the differences that we bring to the table that we know from research really creates a strong team. Diverse teams are strong teams, and they need to understand how to work collaboratively together.
So you're probably going to bring me to the next question because there's so many aspects and factors of teams. Could you give me a couple that you come off the top of your head? What is important to the team? Or group?
Yeah, I think teams and groups. And so again, it's a little bit different. And I do a lot of work still in the virtual space. So our virtual teams, albeit their teams are more like groups in the fact that many of them operate independently. They may actually be part of matrix teams. So they may be reporting to a couple of teams. But against that backdrop, teaming today is critical because teams are moving faster, quicker. So they need to be on point. They need to really understand what's their purpose. How are they going to get there? What resources do they have? And how do they work effectively? And I think if I look out across many decades now, 3 decades of team development work, because I started this work in my late teenage years, it really comes back to how do we work effectively with each other? How do we learn to work across the differences that we bring in a way that is respectful and in a way that is actually effective? Because the business context is changing so dramatically, and I have no doubt this fall of 2018 will bring even greater changes. We need to keep moving while we're figuring it out, while we figure out how to work most effectively as a team. And what that means is, a lot of the historical activities we would do, setting vision. I remember starting out as a young professional, as a young leader, we were using strategic planning in 10-year windows. Today, 10 years, that is a lifetime. That is probably way longer than the lifetime of the teams that we're working with. So how do we readjust that focus as well? And how do we do it in a way where teams are communicating, learning, developing on the fly as they go? And that's to, from one to many. My book has been out since 2013, so 5 years. A lot has changed in the last 5 years around teamwork.
So it's time for another book, I guess, Jennifer.
Well, it is. So my later book, some of you may know me through Effective Virtual Conversations, which came out last year. And I'm currently working on one for virtual team leaders because I think, many of us, myself included, are thrust into the role of being a virtual team leader. And it's a different skill set. So that was my world for 15 years before I jumped into Potentials Realized in 2004. But the issues are still the same, whether we're talking 1990s or 2018. So stay tuned for that. That's coming out in 2019.
Absolutely stay tuned for that. But underlying everything you've said is communication.
Absolutely.
Communication. Yes. So I'm going to throw it at you. What are some questions we could ask of a client, a team, a member, a participant? What are the types of questions you would ask as a coach to become more aware of their skills, their communication skills?
Yeah. I always like to start with, what's the intent of your conversations? I think we're conversing all day long, but how intentional are we? So what is the end result that you're looking for from a particular conversation? what's important to the other person, and how are you keeping that in mind? I think it's Stephen Covey who wrote and talked years ago about, begin with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. And I think in today's conversational arena, whether it is verbal, digital, email, we really need to be very, very clear about our purpose, our biases, as well as who are we communicating with, because email today is so misused in terms of, is it the right vehicle? Is what I'm saying going to be interpreted? Because we lose all tonality when we're using the digital mechanisms. Yeah. Likewise, the digital vehicles today take us into the global space. So how am I keeping in mind, I know you're in Montreal, I'm in Toronto. How are things interpreted in slightly different variances? We're both Canadian, but there's a difference between Toronto and Montreal. And having lived in both cities, I know that, and I can appreciate that. So again, we always need to think about who we're in conversation with, what's important to them. So whether it is a team conversation or conversation between two peers, or whether you're talking with your boss or direct subordinates, it really is a way to be intentional and also check in. What has been interpreted? Is what I'm saying really being interpreted in the way that I mean? It's
interesting when you first started talking right now, what came back at me is self-awareness.
Yes.
Because I think that's the gift to life. I really do. I mean, I need to know myself to help others. There's just really, how many other ways? I need self-awareness is absolutely key. You mentioned that, and thank you.
Yes. And again, self-awareness means, what am I good at? And how do my overused strengths become those blind spots? So how do I need to adjust as well? And I think that's what I find all the time in my work as a coach. A lot of people, especially team members, will come and say, oh yes, we've done this assessment. I know I'm a this. And it's like, okay, you're a that, but what do you need to do in order to build relationships, be in dialogue with other people? What needs to shift? Because we all are in spirit of collaboration. We're all needing to adjust the way we approach our work, our conversations, and our results every day.
And as a psychologist, the awareness piece also goes with the biases, needing to know our bias, self-aware of our biases, which people don't tend to often want to be in touch with, and that's part of it in acting as a coach, which I removed myself as a psychologist, but we still have to understand biases no matter what. And the elephant in the room, all the things that go around it.
Absolutely. Well, the main thrust of my work continues to be global, and I've had the privilege of working across 4 or 5 continents of the world. And we collectively, in any given day, wherever we are in the world, chances are we're probably in a conversation which needs or would benefit from exploring, what are the biases I'm bringing? How does how I see the world vary a little bit different from the other person? And so, I think this is, even in today's world, which is not always integrated, there are a lot of barriers coming up, but I think with the digital channels we have, we'll be continuing to be in dialogue, getting results globally. So how are we aware of those biases, and how are we working to adjust as needed?
Thank you. Now, the area which I like very much, and you alluded to that, is emotional intelligence, because we have the IQ and we have EQ. Yes. And I've very much been in that because I taught for so many years too, helping students to achieve maybe a little bit more of the soft skills, rather than I need to study hard and therefore the IQ, we need to have the emotional. So I'm going to read Daniel Goleman, of course.
Of course,
emotional intelligence is the capacity for recognizing our own feelings and those of others, for motivating ourselves, for motivating emotions, for managing emotions well in ourselves and in our relationships. And I'm going to ask you a very broad question. Why is it so important to groups? You are an expert. Why is it so important to groups?
Well, for groups, again, it is, the group conversation, the team conversation is beyond the individual. So how am I aware of what is going on. And just as we look to Goleman's response, it's not just about the self-awareness, it's about the social awareness, it's about the self-management and being able to know, when do I need to show up a little bit differently in the group context? And so group work is inherently collaborative. And so all of these skills in relationship building, all of the skills as well in catalyzing, if we look to Goleman's framework and what he continued to further bring to the world through Primal Leadership. I really like the book Primal Leadership because it breaks down 21 skills that was originally framed for leaders, but I find when I work with groups, helping group members understand, how are you bringing things like social awareness? How are you bringing the skill of catalyzing or impact or service to the conversation? Because in a group setting, we are all different, and there's a give and a take that's really, really needed. So we may be the most brilliant of minds, but if we are not able to work across differences, to be in dialogue, to know how to navigate and influence when we may not be in a position of leadership, these are skills that are critical for individuals, professionals of all walks of life today.
So coaching for emotional intelligence, I believe you would have to agree, we'd have to go through each aspect. Knowing ourselves, knowing others, and self-management, managing ourselves and others' emotions-wise, I don't know which other ways can we really do this? We have to break it down.
And it's interesting, as someone who's been involved with emotional intelligence training, coaching for many decades, it keeps coming back in all different cultural contexts. I remember the first time I met emotional intelligence, I was working in South America, and the training I did was in South America, and it was very, very relevant. It was the 1990s, really critical. I think as teams, as coaches, as leaders, this is really, one of the $1 million areas for us to look at, because we're operating in a context which is rapidly changing. And so that brings so many things to the forefront, including overuse of strengths and skills, right? We're almost overcompensating to meet the uncertainty that exists. And so building the capacity for even receiving feedback by, building that muscle of social awareness and being able to have relationships, trusting relationships where even people feel comfortable to say, that went well, and maybe next time we should be trying this. So I think there's a lot, I think it's a really exciting time actually to be in organizations. There's a lot going on that's challenging, and it's calling people forward. It's calling people to lead and experiment in different ways, perhaps different ways than we've been using in the past. And to me, as someone who has worked, on the global fringe for so many years with the UN and the international aid sector, that's, I think, where people can look back and say, wow, that was amazing conversations we had today, transformational conversations, and it's not easy. It takes a lot. However, I think it really does call people forward to do their best work.
I'll tell you, in listening to you, we've known each other a couple of years, you have tremendous passion.
I do.
You have tremendous zest, enthusiasm, passion to make the world better.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm getting. And it's coming across very clear. So I'm going to ask you just one more question. And as a coach, you don't proclaim yourself to be only a coach. In your book, it caught my eye. You basically said you transitioned from coaching to facilitating to training, not necessarily in that order. Maybe you can help people, because a lot of people will not understand that. Could you just give us an idea?
Well, I think in today's world, this plays out all the time. And in my role as a coach trainer, I get this question all the time. When am I purely coaching? And again, I think it's important that we're very clear, when are we coaching? When are we training? When are we mentoring? When are we facilitating? It may or may not happen in the same conversation, but if it does, we need to really ensure that the people we're in dialogue with are clear on what's going on here. Because in the coaching perspective, as the coach, I'm not the expert. You, my client, whether it's a group, team, or individual, are driving the bus. You're the expert. You're setting the map. You're setting the stage. You're deciding, are we going from A to B or A to Z? And I am there to support you. That's very different than when I may step into a trainer role where perhaps there is some content or information that is of use. And I think certainly as team coaches, we may find ourselves getting pulled a little bit more into the training arena. We need to be explicit, first of all, when we're moving from coach to trainer. There are some instances perhaps where a team can benefit from a model or a framework that they can use in common. For example, I've talked a lot today, difficult conversations. We can coach a team around difficult conversations, but ultimately they're going to need some skills in this area. And that's really when I need to put on the trainer's hat. And I make it very explicit. Finally, we may also be in the facilitator's role and stepping into the group coaching space. This is where I think a lot of coaches moving from individual coaching to coaching many realize I need some additional skills to help move the group process forward. Because as you can appreciate in teams and groups, unless there is trust, unless there is connection, people are not going to engage. And the peer conversation is just as important as the conversation. I would say the peer conversation is even more important than the conversation with the coach. So as a coach, working with many teams or groups or even couples, I think this is where certainly the facilitation skills, helping people reach consensus, helping people move to a decision. That's not purely a coaching skill, it's more of a facilitation skill. And I think coaches, if you're a coach or a leader, you can always benefit from working and building skills in this area. And in fact, that's what led me to write Effective Virtual Conversations last year, because I think more and more of us are getting pulled into the space where we maybe initially weren't trained. And this is where I think mastery and today's conversations, today's context is requiring that we are really approaching a lot of issues from a multidisciplinary lens. Again, these disciplines have been siloed, but increasingly so many of us are working across the distances. So key to it, regardless, is are we clear on what we're doing? Is the person or people we're in dialogue with understanding what their role is? Are we clearly managing expectations so that someone coming to a coaching conversation isn't expecting training? And that's still an issue we see across so many spaces.
So I think that was a really good question, because we needed to clarify that. And a lot of our clients do not know that. And I thank you so much. And I thank you so much, Jennifer, for spending this time with me. I so much appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Zena. Again, thank you for bringing me in virtually, a bit remote as I'm working this summer. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. It sparked a lot of thinking.
And enjoy your summer. Hopefully it's not we'll have a summer. I hate to say that, but we can go to fall quickly, or all of a sudden we hit the 40 degrees here, which is going to be today, Thank you. Enjoy your summer. And I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Me too, Zena. Thank you.
Thank you.